So we've recently changed this aquarium from a saltwater aquarium to a freshwater aquarium. Now I'm a big fan of change. So no matter what fish you've got, I believe that every number of years, if you can walk past your aquarium without looking at it, then I believe it's time to just give it a bit of a change around. So we've swapped it over at the moment. Now I've got some little test fish to get started. So we've got some very nice but not purebred cichlids. We've got a nice big fat rosy barb. We've got a sucking cat. We've got a rainbow shark. So we've got a range of different fish just to get the tank started. Because the tank is only just getting restarted, it's good to just start off with some cheapy fish. We don't want to spend a lot of money. Now, because there's a tiny bit of nitrite ammonia in the water, chances are it's not going to worry anything at all. But if we did add a 5 times dose of prime every couple of days, that would detoxify the ammonia just in case that was any sort of problem. Also, there are products like this one that we can add. So these products are better kept in the fridge once you open them, and what they do is help to give the good bacteria. So when you're changing a tank from saltwater to freshwater, the first thing that has to happen is some of the saltwater bacteria has to die off, and then that will then produce waste, and then that waste will then grow the freshwater bacteria. So once again, this is a process that will occur. It should occur, but it's like growing grass. It should grow, but it doesn't always. So adding products like this really help that process along. And the ammonia level has not gone up at all in the last week. So I'm going to assume it's stable. So as the bacteria is establishing, it should start coming down. So adding some cheap hardy fish would be in the very low risk category. Then we just need to give the tank a couple of weeks. Then we can be a little bit braver with the fish we add. Then we just give it a couple of weeks. We give the water a test. Then we can consider adding more fish. And the key to adding fish is small amounts at a time. And you want to add the fish so the fish end up busy and using the whole aquarium. It's quite common in a big tank like this to add some fish, and you find they hide a lot. And that's normal, because to the fish, the fact there's not a lot of other fish around means danger. Also, whenever we put fish in a tank, we want to not feed for a couple of days, because we want to just let the fish settle in. They don't tend to eat very well when they're new anyway. And then what I want to do after that is start introducing just a tiny little bit of food. So until the bacteria is well established, let's call that 3 or 4 weeks, I want to keep the feeding really low. So I want to just watch the belly of the fish, make sure they're not getting thinner, but at the same time I don't want excess food coming in when we're establishing the tank, because we're relying on bacteria growing. And once again, bacteria should grow, but sometimes it doesn't always grow the way that you're anticipating, hoping, or expecting it to. So getting a water test every week or two, not adding new fish until the water's right, and just being a little bit patient and keep your fish cheap at the start. Then once the tank is established, you've got good cultures of bacteria, then you're all in business. Now, the water at the moment is almost right. KH is almost 5, it's a little bit low, but I'm happy with that. GH is 12, I'm happy with that. pH of 8.1, I'm happy with that. There's a bit of phosphate, not too worried about that. There's a tiny bit of ammonia, no nitrite, nitrate, and a little bit of nitrate. So it's not perfect, but it's pretty good right now. I want to float them on the top for about half an hour before you let them go. And then we just want to make sure the temperature's the same. So at the moment, I'm just checking the temperature in the bag, which seems to be the same as the tank. But it's really important when you're climatizing fish, you've got to leave the bag open if you're going to open it up. You can't fold the bag open and fold the bag over and cut off the oxygen, because you'd be surprised how little time it takes for fish to suffocate in a bag without good surface area. Okay, so we've added some fish to this tank now. Now, it's very normal that they're going to explore the tank, and then they will tend to hide after that, because 2 fish, if there's not many fish around, that can mean danger. So don't be surprised if the fish go in there and they're not as active as you think. That's pretty normal. Now, the next thing we have to look for is territorial behavior. So basically with cichlids, the more cichlids you have, the less likely you're going to have any issues with their temperament is concerned. But you do have to be aware that cichlids are highly intelligent fish, and they are very hierarchy driven. So if you get a bad boss, you have to do something about it. So basically what should happen is the fish will work out who the boss is. And the boss should give everyone a bit of a hurry along, but not hurt anyone. But if you do get a boss that starts actually stressing and hurting the other fish, you've got to do something about it. And what you can do about it is, number 1, you can add more fish. Sometimes that fixes it. Number 2 is you could add fish that will dominate the current dominant fish. And that often works. But if you do get a fish that's harassing the other fish, you really can't afford to leave that fish there forever, because if it keeps stressing the fish, it can actually kill them. Now, how do you know if you're stressing the fish? Now, if he just gives the fish a bit of a chase, then it's nothing to worry about. But if he chases the fish around, and then the fish stops and starts breathing heavily for a while, that means that that interaction has actually stressed the fish. And if you see that behavior, where one fish chases the other fish, and then the fish hides and breathes heavily, that means that that has been stressful. You've also obviously got to watch that they don't bite off each other's fins and tails and all that sort of stuff, which really shouldn't really be a problem, but occasionally it is. So you do need to keep an eye on who the dominant fish is. Because once again, you could have a fish that's a real bastard in your tank. You could then put it in a tank where it's not the dominant fish, and that fish might cause absolutely no problem at all. And that's why I always say, if Hitler is the Chancellor of Germany, that's a big problem. But if he's an accountant, it's probably not such a problem. You might just stuff up your books and not go and kill all the Jews. So that long and short of it is, some fish are better bosses than others, So if you see your boss just giving the other fish a hurry along, but not hurting them, then that's a good boss. If you see a boss pick on an individual and he just keeps picking on it until he kills it, then he'll move on to the next one and he might keep picking on them until he kills it. So if you see that behavior, then you have to do something about it. Either remove Hitler or put in someone that's going to dominate Hitler, or just sometimes adding more fish is good enough. So you can't control your fish, but you do sort of have control over the situation. So far these fish are all settling in very nicely. Now in general, crossbred cichlids, like some of these ones are, these are just little starter fish. They're usually not as colourful as the genuine ones, which isn't strictly true, but they're definitely cheaper. And we do encourage that you have a cichlid aquarium either for display, and therefore it doesn't really matter, or if you are going to breed, we really encourage that you only have one species of fish in the tank, because they can crossbreed. And because we've only got limited varieties of cichlids available in Australia, we really try not to encourage crossbreeding, because if everyone crossbred their fish, then we'd end up just with an Australian cichlid, because they'd all be crossed. The same as like if you've got a dog, and the purebred dogs are always worth more, because the care has to go into the bloodline. And that's the same with fish. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with a crossbred dog, and there's nothing wrong with a crossbred fish. But as far as Australia is concerned, we do not encourage crossbreeding because we don't want to dilute the species that we've got. So these fish are currently behaving absolutely predictably and beautifully. So they're just exploring the aquarium now. The funny thing is I've been into aquariums all my life, and you actually never ever get sick of watching fish, particularly when they're discovering their environment for the first time. The other thing I'm a big fan of is doing a spring clean every now and then. So what I'll actually do is take it all out, clean it all, and put it all back in completely differently, because to the fish, this is their world. And if you create a new world for them to explore, then it's like they've got a whole new life. So I'm a big fan of change. Changing fish, changing decorations, over time change is what I believe keeps you interested. Now the other thing to be aware of with these fish is a lot of cichlids don't have a lot of colour when they're young. So what happens in the wild is they'll be quite plain coloured because they don't want to stand out. Then over time, as they become more dominant, they get territory, then they start to become actually very, very colourful. So over time, they'll become very colourful once they're well established and they've sort of learnt how to survive. So it's really important to just be a bit patient, and you really want to watch the foods you feed. So fish keeping is 50% water quality, which bringing us a sample of water and a little video of the tank running, and we can keep an eye on your water quality. But it's also 50% food quality. So the food that you feed is what makes the fish nice and healthy, and the food is what makes the fish very colourful. And as far as foods are concerned, I'm very biased to New Life Spectrum. I think that's a really good food, and these fish will get New Life Spectrum because there's plenty of them, plenty of it. And I also love Denichi colour. I think Denichi colour is a spectacular food for bringing out the fish's colour. Now there are various artificial colour enhancers you can use, and if you are going to use them, just use them sparingly, because the artificial colour enhancers are actually not good for them long term because they're hormone based, but a little bit of it in the diet isn't really not the end of the world. It will tend to colour the fish up earlier, but ultimately the most spectacular fish, I believe, are fed predominantly on New Life Spectrum and Denichi. I'm very biased to those foods, I really love them. So this tank has a very big filter outside, and aeration is the next most important thing. So we've got a lovely big spray bar here, a big water pump, and that's agitating the surface. And the fact that this surface is really well agitated is what allows us good oxygen levels, because a cichlid tank, we tend to end up having very heavily populated. So you can have plenty of fish in these tanks. And so the idea is to make sure that you have plenty of filtration, you have good quality food, and you definitely have lots of oxygen. So what we'd never want is the surface of this tank to be flat, because we need the gas to exchange. And you can see that it's all well broken across the top here. So this is what gives us nice, good, high oxygen level. And so all is looking very good. In another couple of weeks, we'll bring a little bit more fish down and then slowly populate the tank up. And once we're finished, it should rival any saltwater tank, to the point where most people would actually think it's saltwater. Fish are all schooling beautifully at the moment. So they're all hanging together for security. And then the next thing they'll want to start doing is mapping out their territories. So that can involve a little bit of a fight sometimes, because sometimes they fight over who's going to live in which penthouse. And then once they've sorted out their hierarchy, and that's another reason why it's such a good thing getting the fish small, because if you start off with the fish small, they can set out their hierarchies when they're young, and then when they grow up, they already know who's the boss. Whereas the problem can be that if you go putting bigger fish in, and they want to set their hierarchies, then that can involve them killing each other, because they're much more powerful when they're bigger, and they're much less likely to adopt each other. So once again, if you put them all in when they're young and let them grow up together, sometimes you get a little bit of little big brother syndrome. And what I mean by that is it's quite common that I'll go and visit a tank and I'll see like a little electric yellow chasing around a big venustus or something. And on the outside, that doesn't really sound like it makes much sense. But quite often, it's because the electric yellow was bigger when they had a fight. And then fish actually don't really have a concept of their own growth. So if you go putting another fish with a fish, and then the little one gets bigger than the big one, quite often they don't actually really realise that that's happening because they still fear the encounter that may have happened potentially years ago. So it's like if little brother gets bigger than big brother, but little brother's still scared of big brother because he bashed him when he was 5. So there's a little bit of that going on. The other thing too about fish satisfaction and stress levels and things is they've actually done studies and they've found that when a fish grows up in a certain aquarium, that's his idea of the world. Now, if you have a fish grow in an aquarium and it grows debatably too large for the tank, generally there's no stress signs at all on the fish. But if you go and get another fish that's the same size, but it grew up in a big tank, and then you put it in the small tank, you then can see signs of stress. And when I mean stress, I mean breathing heavily, and they're able to check pH, respiration rates, and cortisol levels and things like that. So there's a lot of value in adding the fish small and then letting them grow up together. So cool. So this is very normal behaviour in the brand new fish, and the next thing we might see them start to break out and start establishing territory. But these are only young ones, so they're not really going to partake in very adult behaviour. As they start to get older, that's when they'll start wanting to be more interested in territory and hierarchy and all that sort of stuff. So a lot of these guys will get much more colourful as they get older, particularly fed on good foods.